Hi, welcome to an overview video for the web application NetChecklist.com. In this video, I'm going to go over what the application does and what it can do for you. So NetChecklist.com is an internet-based computer application, and it runs in any web browser, so you don't need another app taking up memory on your smartphone or tablet. And as the name implies, it lets you create and use checklists. Now, it'll work perfectly well for any type of checklists, but I created it to manage and implement business processes. So this is a completely generic application. I'm going to use examples based on the real estate and construction industries, but don't think that's all it can be used for. It lets you create your own checklists, so it can be used for any type of checklist, business or otherwise. So running a business is all about processes. Over the past 20 years, I've owned and managed several businesses, and during that time, one of the biggest things I've learned is that in order to deliver high quality customer service in an efficient manner, you must have business processes that are both well designed and well implemented. And in order to design and implement business processes, they must be well documented. So when an organization takes time to document their business processes, it's going to enable them to do several things. Number one, it's going to allow them to continually analyze and improve those processes. It's going to allow them to preserve the knowledge and experience that the entire organization develops over a period of many years. It's going to prevent years of experience from being lost when experienced team members leave the organization. And it's going to allow them to multiply the effectiveness of their highly skilled team members by distributing that experience across the organization. And it's also going to help quickly train new members of the organization. So there are two parts to implementing processes. The first is developing and documenting the processes, and the second is making sure that they are completely followed by everyone all the time. And the second one can kind of be broken down into two parts. The first is helping team members follow the processes, and the second one is allowing management to monitor compliance, and this application is going to help with all of that. So this is a task-based application, but don't confuse it with a regular to-do list application. A checklist is a lot different than a to-do list. When you're making a to-do list, you manually record the things that you need to do as you think of them. And there are two problems with this. Number one, they rely on memory. You have to remember that you need to do something before you can add it to your to-do list. And if you don't remember that you need to do something, then it never gets added to your list. And it's hard enough for each of us to remember everything that we need to do. But if you're managing other people, then you're also responsible for everything that everyone who works for you needs to do. So the other problem with to-do lists is that you have to take the time to manually record all of the things that you need to do, either write them down or type them into some computerized application. And if you're using a pen and paper to-do list, then there are also two additional problems. Number one, you can't make things disappear from your list once they've been completed, so you have to keep rewriting your list. And second, you can't sort and filter the items on a handwritten list, which actually turns out to be a pretty big deal, as you'll see in a little bit. So computerized to-do list applications, there are many of them out there, and they do solve those last two problems. They can make things disappear from your list once they're completed, and they can sort and filter a list, but they still don't solve the first two problems. You do still have to remember that you need to do something before it gets added to your list, and you still have to manually type everything in. So for most people, the two problems that they do solve don't make them worth the time and effort that it takes to use them. So very few people actually use them on an ongoing basis. So checklists. Checklists are great for helping people remember all of the things that they need to do for a given process. And if you think you're too smart to need to bother using checklists, then remember that a lot of really smart people use checklists all the time, like astronauts and pilots, and increasingly many very highly trained doctors as well. If you haven't checked it out, check out the book, The Checklist Manifesto, How to Get Things Right by Atul Gawande. It's a very good book, and he talks about a lot of things in the medical industry where very highly trained doctors are using checklists with excellent results. And again, if you're managing other people, it's not just about remembering all of the things that you need to do. it's also about making sure everyone who works for you needs to do. So even if you really don't need a checklist, the people who work for you very well may. So why not just use paper checklists? Well, number one, they're not concise. A paper checklist always displays everything that's on the entire list. So just like with paper to-do lists, you can't make things disappear once they've been completed. And so paper checklists are always going to be cluttered up with things that have already been done, things that need to be done by someone else, things that don't need to be done yet, and things that can't be done yet because something else has to be done first. Also, when you're using paper checklists, you and all of your team members end up having to keep reading and searching through all of the items on all of your checklists just to find the things that you can do at that time. And you may even spend time going through an entire checklist only to find that there's nothing on that checklist that you need to do at that time, and that is just a huge waste of time. So other problems with paper checklists, they're difficult to share when the items on a checklist need to be done by different people. And there's no good way to document or implement task dependencies on a paper checklist. And that is when one thing can't be done until some other thing has been done first. Some other thing, or things, plural. So the only practical way to solve these issues is really by having frequent time-consuming meetings. And so NetChecklist.com solves all of those problems. It allows organizations to create as many checklists as necessary. Each checklist can contain an unlimited number of items, everything that needs to be done to complete a given process. And the items on a checklist are not on the actual task list. A checklist is like a template or blank form that you make a copy of each time you need to use it. And when a checklist is copied, the application enters everything onto the task list for you, so no one ever has to waste time typing in any of the things that need to be done. In the application, the items on a checklist can be assigned to different members of the organization. So sharing checklists between team members is not only possible, it's automatic. And as you're going to see, a computerized application allows you to do things that are very, very difficult or completely impossible to do with paper checklists. So it's going to do three things. It's going to make it easy to develop and document your processes. It's going to make it far easier for your team members to follow your processes. And it's going to allow management to monitor compliance. Those are the things we talked about a while ago. So let's talk about the first one. So formalizing your processes. In this application, just creating your checklist formalizes and defines your processes. These are our processes, which are the checklists. These are the things that need to be done for each process, the items on each checklist. This is how each item needs to be done. You can put a description for each item. This is the order that they need to be done in. That's managed by task dependencies, which are set up in the checklist. These are the people who are assigned to each item. And as you'll see, documenting processes in this application puts them into a form that's just far more usable than putting them on paper does. So the second thing, we said we're going to make it far easier for team members to follow your processes. And we're going to help them follow processes in two ways. Number one, we're going to remind them of everything that they need to do. That's what checklists are for. But we're also going to help them more efficiently so that they can get more done in the same amount of time. And so as far as reminding them of everything they need to do, using checklists to make sure your team members are following procedures is far more effective than just training your team members on what they're supposed to do and hoping that they'll remember, because the exact tasks that each team member needs to do shows up on their task list, and the items stay there until they're marked complete. So it's really hard for someone to just ignore them. And like I've already said, managers can check at any time to see what has and hasn't been done. So let's talk about a real world example, and I think this will kind of make sense. In my property management company, we have about 20 things that need to be done when we sign up a new rental property to manage, and 15 things that need to be done when we get a property rented, and 20 things that need to be done when a tenant gives us a notice that they're going to be moving out. So managing any one of those events is not really all that difficult, if that's all you had to do. But in our busy summer moving season, we can easily get 5 move-out notices, 3 new properties, and 5 properties rented in 1 week. And that works out to like 235 things that need to be done. And at that point, it becomes pretty much impossible for everyone in the organization to remember every single thing that they need to do. Someone is just going to forget something. And it also becomes extremely difficult for everyone to even keep track on what they have and haven't done for each project. So everyone ends up wasting time trying to figure out what they have and haven't done for each project and what they need to do next. And this application fixes all of that. So we said we're going to help them in two ways: remind them of everything that they need to do, and the second one is help them work more efficiently so they can get more done in the same amount of time. So when I first started this project, it was really all about reminding everyone of everything that needed to be done. That was the whole point. That was my whole goal. But as I've used this application in my own businesses and continuously refined it, I have discovered that the efficiency benefits that are gained are at least as important as the reminders, if not even more so. And there are 7 ways that this application helps your team work together more efficiently. Number 1, you and your team will spend less time managing what you need to do. So rather than having you and all of your team members trying to remember everything that you need to do for all of the different projects you're working on and writing all of the items out on to-do lists and constantly rewriting your to-do list, or wasting time shuffling through a bunch of paper checklists trying to find out what needs to be done, you can see a concise list of only what you need to do and can do right then at that moment for every project that you're working on in one place. So by default, the application does not display, and I say by default because you can change things from the defaults, but it's not going to display tasks that have already been completed, things that are assigned to anyone other than the currently logged in user. It's not going to display tasks that don't need to be done yet or that can't be done yet because something else must be done first. So as far as items that don't need to be done yet, an example would be a salesperson following up with a potential customer, say a week after their initial contact. The whole point is to wait a week before contacting them again. So items can be set up on a checklist to always be given a date assigned that's in the future, and then that delay will flow to the actual task list from the checklist each time the checklist is used, and that task then won't show up on that user's task list until the future date arrives. Remember, we said we're going to keep their task list concise, only what they need to do at that time. So users aren't going to see items that they've already completed, items assigned to other people, or that they don't need to do yet. The last item, they're also not going to see items that they can't do yet because something else has to be done first. Quite often, one step in a process can't be done until another step or steps have been done. So the items on a checklist can be made dependent on other items on the checklist. And the dependencies then flow from the checklist to the task list each time the checklist is used. So these dependent tasks won't show up on the task list until the task or tasks that they're dependent on have been marked complete. So a task can be dependent on more than one other task, and that would be like if task D can't be completed until tasks A, B, and C have all been completed. And conversely, multiple tasks can be dependent on one task. That would be where once task A has been completed, then tasks B, C, and D can all be completed. It also makes no difference whatsoever who the dependent tasks and the tasks they're dependent on are assigned to. They can all be assigned to the same person, or they can be assigned to different people. So if Bob can't complete his task until Mary has completed hers, then Bob's task won't show up on his task list until Mary has marked hers complete. So because these delayed tasks and task dependencies are set up on the organization's checklists, they actually become part of the documentation of the organization's business processes. And if you think about it, a process isn't really fully documented without these things. And there's just no good way to document or implement delayed tasks or task dependencies using paper checklists. Now, seriously, think about that. When I managed a construction company for about 15 years, we had a bunch of notes beside the items. We had a notebook full of paper checklists, and we had a staff meeting every week that we went through them, and we had notes beside each thing saying what had to be done before they could be done. But then we ended up having to waste time going through it to check and see whether or not the other items had been done, and a computerized application takes care of all of that for you. So it just makes it all automatic. Remember earlier I said that the application helps document processes, and I said that it puts processes into a form that's far more usable than paper checklists. Well, this is exactly how it does those things. So with this tool, you and all of your team members don't necessarily even have to understand all of the details of how the processes work. Okay, so everyone on your team does not have to understand exactly how your process is set up. Okay, which tasks are deliberately delayed, which tasks must be done before others can be done. All their team members have to do is complete the tasks as they appear on their task list. So once this is set up in your checklist, a lot of it happens in the background. And again, this can help new team members become productive much faster with much less training required. And when a process is changed, you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of time retraining or explaining the change to everyone. It just happens. And again, it's not necessary for everyone to understand the mechanics of setting up the checklist in the application. It's not hard, but you really only need one person in an organization who knows how to do that. So back to the point. I said you and your team will spend less time managing what you need to do. A huge goal of this application is to keep each user's task list concise. It's not productive for an entire team of people to all waste time just trying to figure out what things they need to do. What is productive is getting things done. And the goal is to eliminate distractions to getting things done. So, of the 7 ways the application helps teams work more efficiently, that was the first one. The second is that tasks can be sorted and filtered. So we're already keeping our team members' task list concise by displaying only what they can do and need to do right then. But we can actually take this another step further by allowing our users to further filter their task list to see only one type of task at a time. So I'll give you another property management example. And this is super simplified. Let's say we had 3 new rental properties, and for each one we only needed to do 3 things. We need to make file folders for each of the new properties. We need to prepare the contracts for the property in our forms software, and we need to add the property to the website. Well, doing each of these things in order for each of the new rental properties is not going to be the most efficient way to work. What's going to be more efficient is focusing on one type of task at a time. So it would be more efficient for someone to get out the label maker and make all 3 file folders. Then go into the form software and prepare all 3 contracts, and then go into the website software and add all 3 properties to the website. Now, this is a tremendously simplified example. Think about if there were 10 or 25 or 50 of each of those types of tasks. So in the application, there are many, many ways that users can sort and filter their task list very, very easily. Many of them just require a single mouse click. And it also enables you to set up items on a checklist where they're assigned to a task class to group similar types of tasks. So in our last example, you could have a task list for filing or form software or website updates. And the users can then very easily filter their task list to only see tasks assigned to a given task class. So just by clicking on the task class of form software, they could see everything they need to do in form software, no matter which project it's for, all of the different things. They can do all of that while they're in there, and mark those things off on their checklist as they do them, and then go back and go into website updates and see all of the website updates for different properties, whether it's adding something to the website or taking it off the website or changing the price or adding a feature or whatever. So it's a much more efficient way to work. And I can truly say that after using this application in my organizations for more than 2 years, I've discovered that even if none of us ever forgot to do anything and we didn't need any of the reminders, the application would still be worth using because of the efficiency benefits that we gain by having the ability to filter the task list. so that we can focus on one single type of task at a time. So the third way that it helps your teams work more efficiently is continuous status updates. Earlier I said that one of the problems with paper checklists is that there's no way to document or implement task dependencies. And I managed a construction company for about 15 years, and we spent a lot of time in staff meetings going over paper checklists, 5 to 6 pages long for each house we had under construction. And we basically discussed what had and hadn't been done on each house so that everyone would know what they needed to do next. And what happened was almost as soon as we left the meeting and a few more things got done, then the status of each project had changed and it was already time for another meeting. And what we really needed was a mechanism for continuous status updates. Well, the task dependency feature in this application is a mechanism for continuous status updates, actually automatic continuous status updates. So we already talked about task dependencies once before, but the benefit we were focusing on then was keeping the task list concise, which is important, but this is different. This is a second benefit. When one person can't do something that's assigned to them until someone else has done something else, then that person must somehow be notified when that something else has been done, so they'll know that they can go ahead and do what it is that they need to do. So the dependent task feature of this application does that. Dependent tasks will automatically show up once the task or tasks they're dependent on have been marked complete. And this eliminates the time to have frequent, time-consuming, and boring staff meetings just to go over the status of each project so that everyone will know what they need to do. And it also eliminates the necessity of a lot of phone calls and emails, etc. Have you done this yet? Well, will you do it so I can do this? Well, will you call me when it's done? Did you forget to call me? Blah, blah, blah. Remember, I said it's not productive for team members to waste their time writing out to-do lists or shuffling through paper checklists trying to figure out what it is that they need to do. Well, what's productive is getting things done. Well, staff meetings and phone calls and emails to communicate the status of projects back and forth are all just other time-consuming ways for our team members to figure out what it is that they need to do next. Continuous status updates can also help projects move along much more quickly. If I can't do my task until you do yours, and you complete yours on Thursday morning, but I don't find that out until Monday's staff meeting, then we just wasted several days. But if my task pops up as soon as you check yours off on Tuesday, then the project can keep moving along. Fourth way that the application helps teams work more efficiently is that processes can be optimized. Because you and your team won't be spending nearly as much time training your team members on what it is they're supposed to do and constantly reminding people of everything they're supposed to do, everything they're supposed to do for every process, you'll have more time to invest into reviewing and improving your processes. And doing that will be easier when you do spend time on it because your processes will already be much more thoroughly documented. And again, they'll already be in a form that's much more usable. So looking at what things need to be done for a given process, who needs to do them, how do they need to be done, what order do they need to be done in, what things should be deliberately delayed. And again, when changes are made, you don't have to spend as much time retraining your team on the new procedures and then reminding them of the changes. The changes are just going to show up on their task list. I added a few tasks to one of my property management checklists late one night, and a day or two later, my team started noticing them and commenting, hey, I noticed you added something new. You know, I didn't even have to tell them about it. I didn't have to train on what we were going to do differently. The tasks just started popping up. But if the task dependencies are changed, but no new tasks are added, then they really may not even notice. Their tasks are just going to appear at a different time, and they may pop up in a different order, or something else may not pop up until some other task has been done. Fifth way that the application helps teams work more efficiently is that large tasks can often be broken down into smaller ones. If a large task really consists of several smaller tasks, then it really is kind of more of a process on its own than a task, so it needs to be broken down. And smaller tasks are much less intimidating, and it's much less likely that they'll be put off or avoided by your team members. And small chunks of time often get wasted if team members perceive that they don't have enough time to tackle a large task. But team members can and will tackle smaller, simpler tasks, even if they have only a short period of time available at a given time. And I'll give you a personal example of that. I have a bank account that I have to reconcile each month, and it has a lot of transactions through it, and it's kind of a big process. And for a long time I had a task that said reconcile bank account, and boy, it was really easy to put that off because it was a several hour process, and I would always say, oh gosh, I don't have several hours to do that, and it was hard to get it done. But what I did was I broke it down into like 15 smaller tasks. The first task is just get the bank statement, take it out of the envelope, and put it in my reconciliation folder. Well, you can do that pretty quick. And then it goes through a series of much smaller, much more manageable tasks. And now I find myself, my statement usually gets here on the 9th or 10th of the month, and by the 12th or 13th I always have it reconciled, because I know that even if I only have 5 minutes, there's probably at least 1 or 2 of those little tasks that I can go ahead and knock out. And it's also, it makes it easy to keep track of where I am in the process because I'm checking them off as I go. So when I go back to it, I see, okay, well, here's where I need to pick up. So that I promise that actually works. The sixth way that the application helps teams work more efficiently is that crisis situations can be prevented. When someone doesn't do something important, big problems can result, and big problems often require people to drop everything else that they need to be doing and spend way more time fixing a problem than it would have taken just to do the task when it needed to be done to begin with. And big problems also often require management intervention, so it wastes their time too. The seventh way the application helps teams work more efficiently is the psychological effects. People just naturally like checking off things that they've done off of lists. People feel good and productive when they can check off a lot of things that they've gotten done, and they feel good when their task list is short. And people naturally tend to work harder so they can check off a lot of tasks. And people also will work harder when they know it's really easy for their managers to check at any time and see what they have and haven't done. So again, 7 ways that helps your teams work more efficiently. You and your team will spend less time managing what you need to do. Tasks can be sorted and filtered. Continuous status updates. Processes can be thoughtfully optimized. Large tasks can be broken down into smaller ones. Crisis situations can be prevented, and the psychological effects. So the third thing I said that the application does is it allows management to monitor compliance. So even if you don't do anything else, simply using the checklist, as we've already talked about, will help things run much more smoothly and efficiently. But in the application, any member of an organization who has the user rights of manager or above can see not only the tasks assigned to them, but also those assigned to any other member of the organization. And they can do this from anywhere at any time, and it's all online, so it's discreet. No one is even going to know that someone may be checking up on them. So if your team was using paper checklists, then you'd have to somehow find their checklists if you know where they keep them, and go through them, go through their desk drawer late at night or something like that. And again, people are much more likely to stay caught up when they know that their managers can check on what they have and haven't done at any time without them even knowing about it. So a manager in the application can see what has and hasn't been completed by each member of the organization, which team members are getting their work done and which ones are not, what has and hasn't been done on each checklist, what hasn't been done on each project, which tasks a user completed during a given period of time. And it can also help balance employee workloads. Managers can easily see how many tasks have been assigned to and completed by each employee during a given time period. And the application includes a field called task time for tasks, which can be used to specify how long a given task should normally take to complete. So you can use it, managers can use that field to determine how much work is being assigned to and completed by each employee. And if one employee is currently assigned 10 hours worth of work and another is currently assigned 30 minutes worth of work, then you may want to reassign tasks from one employee to the other. And the users that tasks are assigned to in the checklist can easily be adjusted over time to equitably assign the work to the different members of your organizations. So there are several ways an organization can split up their workload among members. One would be to assign all the tasks on each project to a certain member of the organization. The other would be to assign certain tasks to certain users, no matter which project the tasks are for. Or you could use a combination of the two methods, and this application makes it very easy to implement any of those methods. What's most important is that these assignments can be planned, formalized, and continually reviewed, revised, and optimized. So as far as training new members of the organization, using checklists will automatically help train new members of your organization. New employees often don't know what it is they're supposed to be doing, and so once you start assigning tasks to them, they'll see exactly what they need to do. And tasks can include detailed description of exactly how each task should be completed and where any necessary items are located, and it could even have an explanation of why this task is important for the organization. So the application also enables you to set up recurring tasks, which is where the application automatically adds a single task to a specified user's task list at a given time interval. You can also add recurring checklists, where the application automatically copies an entire checklist at a given time interval. And you can make multiple recurrences of the same checklist. So if each of your salespeople had to do a sales report at the end of each month, and there was 10 steps in that process, you could have it make 10 copies of the same checklist and assign the things to each of your different salespeople. It also enables you to set up checklist branches, where going through a process can take one of two different directions depending on how a user answers a question. But in spite of all that, it obviously can't do everything. There's no way to put everything that every member of your organization needs to do onto checklists. I've been using it in my business for several years, and I still keep a paper to-do list for the odd things that I need to do that aren't on a checklist, but it does cut down on that tremendously. And I will say, whether or not you want to use this application for a given process is going to depend on several things. Even in my businesses, I don't use it on every single process, but I'll give you some examples of when you may and may not want to use it. First of all, how many steps are in a process? The more steps there are, then the more beneficial the application is likely to be. Also, how many instances of a process are going on at one time? If you're using a process to build houses and you only build one house at a time, then you may be able to get by without it. But if you have 15 being built at one time and they're all at different stages of completion, then it will probably be hugely beneficial. The next thing that determines how helpful it will be is how many task dependencies are there. If there are a lot of task dependencies, then it's definitely going to help tremendously, especially if different people are assigned to the dependent tasks and the tasks they're dependent on. Again, that's the communication between the team members. And even for simple processes, task dependencies remind everyone of the proper order in which they need to do things. So even if every step in a process is assigned to the same person, the dependencies are still useful because it can take them through the steps in the proper order. The fourth thing, how many different team members are assigned to tasks from the process. The application is going to be most beneficial for teams of people working together. Not that it's not beneficial even for one person. I use it for things where I'm the only person working, but it really excels when there's multiple people working on things. The more people that are involved in a process, the more beneficial it will be. And again, especially if there are a lot of task dependencies. And the other question about that is, do the people involved in the work in close proximity to each other? If they work in different locations, then they can't really just ask the person sitting at the desk next to them whether they've done something or not. The sixth thing, how many delayed tasks are there? It's very easy to forget about tasks that need to be delayed. Like, remember I said following up with a sales prospect a week or so after initial contact, after another busy week goes by. And if you have a list of prospects you're trying to follow up with every week, which is basically just multiple instances of your process, then and if you had different materials that you wanted to go over with them or send them at each weekly contact, then the application can easily keep track of which thing you need to send or discuss with each prospect each week, and it's much less likely that after your busy week you're going to forget to call them at all. So that's an overview of the application. Thanks for watching. Got lots of other videos that explain the details of how you actually use the application.